Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Zoom get-together called Seeing Jazz. I'm Hrayr Attarian. I'm a member of the Jazz Journalists Association, and I'm a amateur photographer, mostly doing street photography. Today, we have Mr. Lou Jones, who's an accomplished music and fine arts photographer. He's going to talk to us about his work. I just have a couple of reminders. Since we have a large audience today, please mute yourself when not speaking. And for questions, you have two options. You can either raise your hand on Zoom. There's an option in the reactions to raise your hand, or you can just type the question in the chat box and I will read it. Howard Mandel will say a few words about the Jazz Journalists Association before we begin.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce the JJA to those of you who don't know it or have not come to our previous Seeing Jazz events. We are a organization promoting the interests of journalists who cover jazz. And we consider journalists to be writers, photographers, broadcasters, new media professionals, videographers, bloggers, podcasters, pretty much anyone using media to keep the buzz going, news and views of our music. And we consider this kind of communication to be vital in world culture. Not to put too big a head on it, but still. We have about 250 members right now. If you are interested in the organization, I urge you to take a look at our website, which is jjanews.org, and you'll see some of what we're doing there. We also have Facebook and Twitter, for the moment, accounts, and a couple other websites, JJ Jazz Awards, which features our winners and nominees and jazz heroes that are announced every year for 27 years now. And the JJA is a 501c3. Donations are tax deductible, so is membership. And I'll turn it right back to Hrayr and to Lou Jones. Thank you very much.
Hi, I know that a lot of people here are familiar with your work and know you, but I was wondering if you can start off by telling us how you came to be the photographer you are or the artist you are. How did it all start?
Okay, I'm gonna hi everybody. Really, you can't know how delighted I am to see so many of you. I am Lou Jones, and I'm a photographer, and I've used this bad joke before. I told my doctor I was a photographer, and he said that's a really wonderful thing that you can admit to it. It's the first step in a cure. So anyway, I'm gonna share screen here. A number of you know me, and have had some kind of knowledge of my photography in general, but also my photography specifically today about the jazz work that I have done over the years. You asked the question. I am a commercial. Behind these walls, this brick wall here is a big studio, and attached to the studio is a big office with all my employees come in, you know, during the week, and a lot of our work is now on location, so we spend half as much time in the office as we do out on location. But I'm a commercial photographer, but I didn't start off that way. My degrees were in physics. I was a physicist, and after I left college, I went to work for NASA. So someone pointed out several years ago that at one point I was a rocket scientist. But I learned photography in college, but purely as an amateur, purely as a hobby. and then became a photographer much after I had worked in physics for a while. But anyway, my work I started out at a time that was very complicated. You know, it was the hippie era. It was media, TV, all of those things were becoming, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but being a Black man trying to make a living in photography in those days was virtually impossible. There were very, very, very few people, Black men, women too, being photographers, other than say maybe wedding photographers and event photographers and a few wonderful newspaper photographers. But I was trying to be a commercial photographer, and to date, I have shot assignments in 61 foreign countries. I photographed 13 Olympic Games, both summer and winter. For those of you who are trying to count and say, I can't be that old, I did both summer and winter, one of the few photographers that did both. And I photographed 27 men and women on death rows around the United States, on I think 14 death rows a few years ago. But so I have sort of made the shooting for Fortune 500 companies, small foundations, all kinds of things all over the world, in magazines, newspapers, all of that. I kept and got well known, death row, tall ships, jazz, Pan Africa, which I'll talk about much later. I do these very long-term projects. That's what I've sort of made my career around. And jazz is the longest. It literally started. I couldn't get hired by any, we were in that era where Rolling Stone was becoming an important, alternative news source, using photography, talking about music, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody, all my peers, we all wanted to be rock and roll photographers. We wanted to chase the Rolling Stones and the Who and the like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But I couldn't get hired. Nobody would hire me. It was just, and so I had to become a source in and of. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger, because I need to be able to get to certain parts of this. Yes, to be able to go from one picture to the other. Anyway, I hope I talked enough about my beginnings, but I want to talk about the beginnings of how I got into jazz photography. Like I said, I was trying to go to, in those days, like I said, Rolling Stone, but in the Boston area, almost every large city had an alternative fashioning itself after the Rolling Stone magazine newspaper. So we had, over years, we had the Phoenix, Boston After Dark, and the Real paper. And eventually I photographed a lot of these musicians for those alternative magazines. But how I got started, and my work is a little different. That's hopefully why the Jazz Journalist Association asked me to talk about it, is that I was a singer. I had bands in college. I was singing and playing and in bands, and I'm falling in love with the music, and jazz was just, I was literally became obsessed with it in college. And so after having started to pick up photography while in college, I started to chase the rock and roll bands and things like that. And I remember.
So, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What year was it that you left NASA, started following
Oh, left
photography?
NASA. I claim that I started officially being a photographer in 1972.
Okay.
But I would have left NASA probably late 69, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a long time. You're making me old man, and you know, I try to hide my age, but it does go back, and that's one of the reasons I have a tremendous span of work, is because I've been doing this a very, very long time. But yes, it was probably left NASA right around 1969. I was in graduate school, went to NASA for a while, and then helped start a couple of big computer companies, and then sort of left and realized that I wanted to be a photographer. But my jazz work, I was in a club. I was going down to clubs. I walked in those days, it was if any of you remember from the Boston area, you may remember, you're all too young to remember mostly, but there was a place on Boylston Street called the Jazz Workshop and Paul's Mall. And so I was there. I was hearing, and I think the denouement, the light bulb over my head went off. I went down. I would sneak into the clubs. I didn't have any money, so I would sneak in. I would sneak in the back door, or eventually I would get somebody to put me on the guest list or something. I never paid to go in, but and I wasn't a big drinker, so they never made any real money from me. And I went in, and I think it was Stanley Turrentine, if anybody remembers the wonderful musician Stanley Turrentine. And so I was there to hear his music, and sitting halfway back, I realized I had no idea who Stanley Turrentine was. He had a huge band on stage and a lot of horn players. So I didn't know what he looked like. I knew his music, but I didn't know what he looked like. And I said, that's a problem, until he actually spoke to introduce the band, but they were in the middle of playing for quite a while. I had no idea. So I went, maybe I can, how do I change that so that people know? So here's a perfect example. This is Art Blakey. He was playing at the Jazz Workshop, and I went down and I convinced him to come. And this was the beginning. I had no idea what I was doing. I had grown up on the pictures of black men, black and white photographs of black men, harshly lit from a spotlight from the back of the room, this edge light on them, and a horn, and a bright, in black and white, bright horn. That was my entire image of what jazz was. I had no idea what they looked like. So I went and said to Art, I said, can I take your picture? He said, take all the pictures you want. And I said, no. I want you in a situation where I can control it and do a better job of that. And I said, I'll do you backstage. I'll take your picture in your hotel room. I'll take you. And so this is my mentor, a wonderful Frenchman who had a studio in downtown Boston, allowed me to use his studio. And we shot for hours, took Art down there, bought him lunch. We photographed. Anyway, we had finished, and but the idea was to be able to see what they actually looked like, and often away from their instrument. So that's where it began. Anyway, let's see where we go. Oh, here. This will sort of, hopefully, this is Dizzy Gillespie. And again, black and white. And you know, you get your curators and things like that who claim that black and white is the only true art in photography, you know, and I say that's nonsense. I did a lecture several years ago on the fact that when we were starting out, black and white is all we had. So of course people were gonna, now we get rid of, it has the artful thing of not having color, it's different, et cetera, et cetera. But basically we didn't have. So we would go in the darkroom, print black and white pictures. This was, I was sitting at this table, the table that my computer is on. I went home and got a big truck and brought this back. I used to eat dinner with my mother and father around this table. And I was doing that. I was writing. I think it was Christmas. It says December 74. So it must have been Christmas time. And I was sitting at the table writing, and I had Howard University radio on and onto the jazz show. So I was listening to music, listening to jazz. They were great show, great radio station. Anyway, the fellow, the MC, the disc jockey said, "We have Dizzy Gillespie here in the studio with us." And I perked up and I said, my house was very close to Howard University. So it was just down the street. So I said, "Oh, Dizzy Gillespie is just down the street in the studio. Maybe I can go and get." So I called the studio, in those days, there was no cell phones, no internet. I called the studio, got the DJ. He said, "Oh, we taped that thing yesterday. He's not here. I was disappointed." He says he's playing. So my parents, who paid a lot of money for me to get a wonderful education in physics, thinking that I was going to go make some money, just never reconciled the fact that my mother died at 100 years old, always thinking I was going to make something of myself. And she died at 100, disappointed. Anyway, my father took me down that night to the club that Dizzy was playing at. And I walked up to the front door and the guy said, "It's a cover charge, you can't get in." And I was like, I couldn't afford to get in. And my father was sitting in his car out waiting for me. And I said, wait a minute. I said, "If I wait to the break, will you let me in to see if I can convince Dizzy?" He said, yeah. So I stood literally face to face with this guy as people went in and out until the break. I went in and I had a few minutes. I went up to Dizzy. I convinced him to let me take his photograph. In those days, you could get right up against the artist. It was a completely different era. So I said, "Can I take your photo?" "Oh, yeah. And I said, no, it's got to be in." He says, "Call me at my hotel." So this is his hotel room in Washington, D.C. And he just sat there. He didn't do much. Talked to me. We had a great talk. But anyway, he said, "Can I smoke?" And I was allergic, but are you going to tell Dizzy Gillespie he can't smoke? That was, so this picture is being used, is going to be probably used by one of the big labs here as their Christmas gift, along with Bruce Springsteen. They're doing a big music portfolio. So this would be, but this is the way. So I was literally talking to them and convincing them to let me take their picture outside of their normal venue. Let's see, I go to another one. If anybody's got any questions. So I use the technique like this. So this is McCoy Tyner. He came to the workshop. The Dizzy was done in Washington, D.C., but this was back at the Boston Jazz Workshop. And I learned very quickly that I had to improve my technique in order to get to these people. So we call it the elevator speech. So I honed it down. I think it was like about 37 seconds, because you could not, they were always surrounded by fans. sycophants. They were always surrounded by people who wanted a piece of them, people they knew, people they didn't know. So I could never get a word in edgewise. I could never say anything. I could never convince them. It literally took a lot of negotiations to get them to say yes. So I used to stalk them around the club. I'd watch where they went and see when they were not near somebody. And I eventually found out, and this is a horrible, people have heard this before, but I found that the best place was to stand just outside the men's room, because they were never with anybody then. I could grab them just outside the men's room and say to them, and I got my 37 seconds, and he said, so I took him, I put him in a cab, and we went to a park near my studio, and that was the technique. So I developed this technique where I could get my word in, and he was wonderful. He was really wonderful. Let's see if there's. So I used this exact same technique with Carmen McRae. She was at a hotel right across the street from, so I got her while she was performing, convinced her, but the stories become more and more elaborate because in those days, this was a long time ago. When was this? This was 1976. She was performing, but it was the dead of winter and it was very cold. In those days, it was hard, low ISOs, low ASAs on the film. So I wanted to take her outside. I wanted to get something a little different than that hotel room feeling. But it was very cold. I thought I was going to take her somewhere, but she balked and sat down on this park bench. You could see how cold it was. She had her fur coat on, her gloves on. And so she was mad at me that she was so cold, and so she wasn't talking to me. And if anybody knew her or knew her reputation, she could be quite a handful. So she was quite, but you have to see that she was giving me what I needed, what I wanted. She was allowing me to photograph her, which was really what the whole thing was. But I had to make pictures of her completely wrapped up. But Carmen Ray, I lost the role of the black and white. I shot color and black and white. I lost the role of, I think it's the only roll of film I've ever lost in my life. So it just completely broke my heart. So everything that I have of Carmen McRae is in color.
Do you
Yes.
ask their permission later to publish them, the photos?
No, it was during this era, the act of asking for model releases, which is something that we do religiously with our work, or did for years and years and years. So we have, just filing cabinets full of model releases, but I didn't ask model releases for any of these, musicians. No. So
did you mix black and white and color together from the start, or was there a time where you started doing color?
Because of my commercial work, became a color photographer, even though the early days were almost all black and white. So back in these days, literally photographers, we used to wear 2 and 3 cameras around our necks. One would be color, one would be black and white, one would have a short lens, one would have a telephoto. So we went around the world literally with 2 and 3 cameras around our necks. I've seen pictures of some of the great photographers with even more, 4 and 5 cameras around their necks. I never probably got more than maybe 3 cameras around, but I shot both. So we literally, and you had to use the light meter and all of that, very, very meticulous kind of things, in order, whereas it's become a lot more easy. But I was shooting both black and white and color.
Okay. Together. Okay.
Yes.
Lou,
Yes.
what were you doing with these photos? Were you able to sell them at the time, or?
In the beginning, like I said, no, but because I was starting to show these pictures in my portfolios and so by the time I'm going to show you let me take it to the next, not the next one, but an 881, very simple. So by the time I got to Jack DeJohnette, yes, I was starting to get those same papers that I said that wouldn't hire me, they were sending me. And I was trying to do very similar work where I wasn't standing with my colleagues at the base of the bandstand and just photographing them in bad lighting. This particular photograph, by this time I had developed the ability, and so this was a rehearsal. So this was still at the jazz workshop, but I was able to go in the afternoon and photograph. They were usually there for several days. They were there for probably from Tuesday to Sunday, I believe. So getting in earlier, being able to be there for hours, et cetera, was really quite a privilege, but I worked the system. So yes, so I was now being paid for these photographs. And but I developed as a labor of love. And so this, this was rehearsal. This is a rehearsal. And I want to sort of show you. Go ahead.
When you have a chance, Sue wants to know more about the Miles Davis photo.
Oh, I'm going to talk, Sue, if Lee, I don't even know if Connor is on. He said he was going to be on. I'll talk about it in a minute. If you can hold off. Can you hold off? I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that shot. This is Les McCann, and this is the same thing. So now I'm being paid to go and photograph when they came to town, so that, and it was early again, so I was being given a little bit of help because I could know well in advance when they were coming, and you leverage it a little bit. Most people to be able to go for the rehearsal. So this was a rehearsal for Les McCann. I think it was one of the first times that I met, and every time he came to Boston from then on, for years, I would go see him, and we would have dinner together. So the relationships changed. The arc, not only of being hired, being using black and white, being using black and white and color, getting better access, getting hired to shoot for clients, et cetera, et cetera. So I was able to, by this time, actually start to develop relationships with some. I won't say all. Sue is asking a question. I will get it. I'll get to it, Sue. I swear I will. I swear I will. So it turned into those kinds of rehearsals. I'm getting different kinds of access. So now I'm hearing about what they're doing while they're in town, not on the bandstand, not just the time. So I'm chasing them and standing at the base of the bandstand and off in the wings or whatever it is. And this is Betty Carter. And they said that she was going to be signing autographs at one of the big record stores. So this is Betty Carter. So I'm trying to, like I said, not only am I trying to fight against the way a lot of photographers, which was shooting right at the band, at the act of performing, which is the most important thing, but I was trying to be different. I was trying to have my photographs different. I was trying to have my photographs so that the people were recognizable. I was trying to distinguish myself from my colleagues, one, to have a different kind of work, but also to make me different and more, hopefully more hireable. So I chased her and was able to so we'll get it. So I will, let's see. Sue, I'm going to go there now. I'm going to go there now. So this is a picture of Miles Davis. And I'm going to tell, many people have heard this story, but I'm going to do it again anyway. I was working in a lab, a black and white lab, printing pictures, and the wonderful photographer, the mentor I told you, the Frenchman, would allow me to shoot jobs actually in his studio. And one day I got to work, and the lab, his #1 lab assistant said, "Lou, my brother just said that this jazz musician is at his gym." I said, "Oh, well, he wasn't paying much attention. The guy was a doofus, and I just had no idea what." He said, yeah, I don't know who, I can't remember his name. But he's famous. And he said, give me some names. I said, I gave him a bunch of names, and no. And I just being flip, I said, "Miles Davis." And he said, that's him. And before he said, he acknowledged, I was out the door with my camera bag down to the north end where this gym was. And I ran up the stairs using public transportation, ran up the stairs. And at the top of the stairs was this mesomorph. The guy was at least as wide as I was tall. Huge, man. Rickety stairs. And I got there, and he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, I heard that Miles Davis was working out here. I want to go take his picture." He says, "You're not going anywhere. You're not getting in there." I said, "Oh, no, you got to let me. I got to." He says, "No, you're not." I said, and I was like completely crestfallen. And I just went, "Oh." I said, wait a minute. Let me just go ask him. Just let me ask him if I can take his picture. If I can ask, if he says no, I'll leave. He says, "Okay, you got 5 minutes." So I went in. This is a big gym. He was working out on the speed bag. He was, and my 5 minutes was going up, but I wasn't going to interrupt Miles Davis from anything. His reputation preceded him. He was difficult. So he finished up, and I knew the bodyguard was trying to get me out. Finally, he stopped and he says, "Now you have to remember, some of you may have met Miles, at least Miles had a problem with his voice. So Miles talked like this, really low. It was a real power position. He knew the power of it because everybody had to lean in. Everybody had to lean in to hear, but he talked like this. So he says, "What you want?" And I told Connor Moynihan. Connor Moynihan is from RISD, a curator of RISD, came to the studio just the other day, just a couple of days ago, to look at my body of work, of which a lot of it was the jazz, but he looked at a lot of like Pan-Africa, etc. And I told him I would tell this story. So I kept the story away from him. So hopefully he's tuned in. But anyway, he leaned up, he says, "Well, who?" I said, so my voice went up 2 or 3 octaves. He's the only person I can think of that ever intimidated me in my entire career. Miles Davis' reputation preceded him. So I said, "Mr. Davis, I've been photographing jazz musicians for years now, and I really would like to take your picture. I'd really like to add you to the collection." And I was, and he just looked down. He went, "Who you got?" He was asking about who I had photographed before. And I just completely panicked. And just like that scene in the movie Aliens, where Arnold Schwarzenegger walks into the police station and you see POV, point of view, inside his head looking out, all you see is computer screens and calculations and color, digital things going click, 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 because he's thinking about how he's going to handle this situation. I thought that was just a movie trick. It actually happened to me. I just saw this spreadsheet in front of me. I knew that Miles suffered no fools. He hated everybody. And if you weren't worthy to him, so I went, oh my God, who have I photographed that he would consider quality enough? And I went, oh, let me think who, and I sort of thought maybe the people he played with. So I went, I've got Mingus, I got Dizzy, and he looked down and came up, and in that voice he said, they ain't shit. So I was turning on my heels to leave, and he said, as I was behind me, he says, but take all the pictures you want. And this is a picture of him while he was warming up between, this is probably the most sold photograph that I have in my jazz collection. I exhibit the jazz collection fairly often, and this one has been sold many times. So I hope, Sue, that's the story that that you were hoping for.
Excuse me for interrupting. Who was the French photographer you mentioned a few times?
Do that again? Oh, his name is Jean-Pierre Rago. He's not a photographer anymore. He lives up in Maine. I have been telling him for years, thanking him for years for my career, but he doesn't take pictures anymore. But his daughter may be actually told his daughter to tune in, so she may be on tonight. But his name is Jean-Pierre Rago. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. That's really, really wonderful. Well, one of the things that I had to start to do is think about photographing local people who, it's one thing to chase sort of big names, like you sort of do, but I started to chase local people. And this is Donnell Fox. Lives right here in Roxbury, I believe. I've known him for years and years and years. This is my old studio. I had a huge studio that, like I said, there's a studio behind me here, but that I can drive into. But this one, I think I could drive 2 or 3 trucks into, and which we did over the years. And but Donnell came in, and so we set this up. And this was one of the first times I photographed him. He's used my photographs for years. You see, he's still using this picture, and you see it was done in 2010. So, but he's been using my photographs for his CDs, for his publicity, et cetera, et cetera. Wonderful composer, wonderful pianist, very eclectic kind of jazz. But one of the things I've really spent a lot of time doing is photographing the musicians who are here in my community, people I can touch, who, and so I've become a very good friend. I think a good friend of, I hope he would say I've become a good friend of his over the years, and photographed him many, 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 many times. And like I said, he's used these pictures for all types of things. And this picture, this is Ricky Ford. Some of you may remember Ricky. I've known him since I think he was like 15 years old. He was just a prodigy, playing saxophone way back when he was very, very young. He lives in France now. He runs a jazz festival in France outside of Paris. And this was when he was in town a couple of years ago. When was this taken? 2015. And it was taken literally right in front of me. That piano, I went to pick up the table that I'm sitting at, and picked up this piano. My mother, I learned piano, took piano lessons on this piano. And so it's right here in this room right now that I'm sitting in. This was Ricky when he came to play with one of the groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the love the labor of love, besides being people paying us to do these pictures, it's an amazing phenomenon. So I will go down and tell another story about the obsession of chasing these people. And this was a photograph of Ron Carter a few years ago. And I chased him for years. And I think I went, and this was the Regatta Bar. And I got to him. I paid money to get into the Regatta Bar, paid for a ticket. And by this time, I was able to afford going to these clubs. And I got him and I said, I talked with him on the phone long before he got there, long before he came to town. I got him on the phone. I said, I want to take your photograph when you come to Boston. Please let me. He said, yes, no problem. Paid for a ticket to get in to see him, so that, you know, my exploitation of taking his picture, I was, you know, at least paying for the, so I got him. And after the session, after the set, I got him. I said, you know, remember me? We talked on the phone. He said, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. I said, no. You said that I could take, no, I don't have time. I'm here to see my son. I don't have time to mess around with you. I said, please. You know, I was begging. I said, no, I said, he says, I'm leaving tomorrow. And I said, I'll come to the airport. I will photograph you in the airport. He said, no, I don't have time. He said, you can take my picture when I come back the next year. A year later, he came back. I did the same thing, paid to go into the club, buttonholed him after. And he said, no, I don't want to. I said, wait a minute. I said, I don't want to be a jerk, but you promised that I could have your photograph last year. And amazingly enough, he remembered. So he says, okay. So I had set up in another room, this was at the hotel where the club is, set up in the room. I must have taken like 4 or 5 frames, and he got up and walked out. But I got this wonderful picture of Ron Carter after a couple of years of persistence. And so a lot of the photographs have these long, involved stories. And this one is Gato Barbieri, done in 1975. And he was also playing at the Jazz Workshop. So I buttonholed him probably outside the bathroom and got him to say yes. So I picked him up at the hotel. Now you see how sartorial splendor that he just used to dress just so. And so I'm walking down the street with him, and you can see Doofus Jones, you know, with a big old nasty camera bag and sort of shaggy, and walking next to this beautiful dressed man. And we walking down, and I saw this doorway. This is a church doorway, beautiful church right on Boylston Street. And it was overcast day, so it was good light for this kind of thing, but the doorway was a little darker. So he was standing back in the darkness like that. It was a very unique situation where he was there. So I was out on the sort of sidewalk, and he was back in the sort of alcove, dark light, but I loved the door, and I put him there, and he leaned up against, he said, can I smoke? Again, you know, you're not going to tell these wonderful artists no. So he literally struck a match, and the entire doorway lit up. Just from that one little match, the entire alcove just lit up for an instant, just like that. And I realized that something was really glorious going to happen. So he sort of fumbled around a little bit, got the cigarette out, and that's, so when he put the cigarette up to his mouth, I got this. Now this photograph is being used, just sold and is on the cover of a poetry book. So the picture was taken how long ago? This was 1975. Somebody do the math for me. What's that, 30 years ago? Maybe longer, actually. Yeah, it's longer than that. So I photographed him, and just look at how beautiful. I chased him around other places in Washington, D.C. and places like that, but I never got to photograph him again. I'm going to go, if you give me just a brief time to unshare, if everybody's still there, I'm going to go and try to pull up a photograph. I could only find this photograph. My assistant did not put this photograph up on the website, but it's a very important photograph. Let me see. Okay, now I'm going to go try to, can you see it? Let's see if I can, there it is, there it is.
No, we can't.
Okay, wait a minute. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, this is Charlie Mingus, and this has another story very similar to the Miles Davis story, so that's why I wanted to be sure that I talked a little bit about it. Let me see if I can move it over. Again, I was using that technique of, and literally I got Mingus because everybody was surrounding him. I got him just outside the bathroom, and he very confusedly just didn't know what to make of me, saying, I want to photograph you in a situation. And he said, yes, call me at my hotel, which was, again, right, you know, the jazz workshop put him up right across the street. He said, call me at the hotel tomorrow. Don't call me early. He said, don't call me early. I sleep. He said, but keep calling. Even if you don't get me, keep calling. And so the next day, probably around noontime, I called the hotel. Again, you went through an operator in those days, and the phone must have rung 10, 12 times. I was really feeling very, finally he picked up, and I heard, what? You could tell he was asleep. I said, you told me to give you a call to take a photograph. He says, I'm sleeping. Call me back later. I waited a couple of hours, called him back several times, picked up, what? I said, is it a good time? He said, no, call me back later. Hung up the phone. A few hours later, I'm feeling kind of really, he picked up the phone. He says, yeah, pick me up in an hour. And I didn't have any money. I didn't have a pot to piss in those days. So I took my little change jar and shook out all the money I had, put all the quarters and nickels and dimes together. And I walked from my studio, which is all across town, to get to him, to the hotel, picked him up, got in a cab, brought him back. And my studio was on the 4th floor. He's pushing about 350 pounds. So I'm in the cab talking to him, and I'm just having a great old time. And I'm thinking I'm going to have the best friend of Charlie Mingus for the rest of my life. We're going to have a great old time trading stories. And he hit those stairs, and he had to hump himself up 4 flights of stairs. And he was pissed. So he says, you ain't got no elevator. I said, I'm sorry. I didn't even think of that. Never thought of it. Got him in there. This is my studio. So I put him up against, I put the umbrellas, the lights, and all that stuff. And I said, I realized he was, and I was starting to talk, I was telling stories and trying to engage him and trying to get him to be comfortable. So he'd do things for me. And I was trying to do all kinds, and I was literally doing cartwheels to try to, and he wouldn't say a word, would not say a word to me. He was just hump, oh yeah, okay, blah, blah, blah. You could tell he was really angry. Now, this was a huge ego, a huge person, huge personality, a genius. So he realized he was trapped in the studio of this jerk photographer. And again, he said, "Can I smoke?" And I said, "Go right ahead." So he lit up. I did several photographs. I don't know if Lee, I believe I told Lee Mergner. I don't know if anybody knows him. He gave career to a lot of jazz photographers, he published a magazine called Jazz Times for years, and he used my photographs often. And this was a cover. He used this on the cover of one of his magazines several years ago. And I told him about it. I don't know if he's tuned in, but it would be, some of you may know him as an editor of Jazz Times, but he used it. He published me several times. But anyway, the photograph was just, so I walked him back downstairs, called a cab. Cab came. I gave him the rest of the money, little $3, $4, $5 that I had in change. I poured it into the cab drivers, and I never saw him again. But I got this beautiful, beautiful series, both color and black and white, of probably one of the great geniuses of, but I wanted to tell the stories again about obsession. And I'm gonna stop share and go back to the original.
So these older photographs that were on film, are you still using it?
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. I will show you here. Here's a photograph that's digital. So this is you see 2019. I was doing a job in Kansas City. This was in Kansas City, you know, sort of the home of jazz. And so I photographed this, but this is all digital. So the world, and this was a local musician, really wonderful local musician that I befriended and got him to pose in front of this amazing structure. But, this is digital. This was done, what year? 2012. So everything we do now, I have one project, one long-term project, 20-year project that I still do on 2.25 black and white film, but everything else that we do is digital. So this is a photograph. This is the studio, the wall that you see behind me, the brick wall that you see behind me. On the other side of that is this wall in the studio. And this is Brian McRae. He lives in Hawaii. He used to come every year and play at the Top of the Hub, which doesn't play jazz anymore, I don't think. But anyway, I photographed him just like this is a local friendship, wonderful, wonderful friendship. And the world, it is the world of digital that we're able to.
In your studio with your, you said you have employees, are you primarily doing the commercial work there, or are you? Yes.
We shoot commercial work, but also we do a lot of still life, and we do a lot of fine art work that the studio, you know, one of the things I found years ago was that, you know, I realized when I was very, very, very young, you know, back in the early 70s, that I had 2 chances of making it as a photographer. A black man making it as a photographer in those days, slim and none. So I have a home and a studio, and I've always lived inside my studio. So at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm shooting still life photographs, et cetera, et cetera. This is Sun Ra. This was the old days, a studio I had way down in the South End. This photograph got me my first studio business manager. She saw this photograph, knew Sun Ra, knew the work, fell in love with the photograph, and said, I have to work. And she literally gave me a career. This sort of ne'er-do-well photographer, she did all the paid bills, insurance, did invoices, invested my money, etc., and it gave me the foundation. but also photographs.
What was
do
her
have
name?
power.
What is her name?
Her name is Jacqueline Humbert. She's just finished being the CFO of a big law firm. So so she took that experience that she got with me also and made a big, huge career from it. But she was with me for double figure years, literally. But this was at a loft, in a loft after he had played all night. This was probably 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. This was dawn. And this was hanging in a show and an exhibit years ago. She saw the photograph, was a jazz lover, and said that anybody could shoot a photograph like that, I want to work for. So photography has power, right? Really, really has power.
I'm curious. What is your long-term project that you're still shooting medium format film?
Oh, it is called. It's really complicated. We just had an enormous exhibit. It's called Distressed, and it's shot on black and white. The prints are small, 11 by 14. It is an homage to the early days of photography, and it's about. I'm going to use a word that I didn't know until somebody told me. It's called. Anyway, it's dreams. I got to remember the word. The word is. Anyway, it's when you, at that time, I get dreams. Lots of artists claim that they remember or don't remember when they're dreaming, and being able to turn that into their writing or their paintings or their photographs. And that time when you're almost asleep, almost awake, it happens when you're going to sleep, and it happens when you're waking up. Anyway, so that's what so that I shoot it in black and white because I'm not going to say I dream in black and white. I have no idea if I dream in color or black and white. If anybody really has that phenomenon. I know that a few other people are saying. But anyway, I get these bizarre images in my head. And if I can get to the paper next to my bed fast enough and scribble them down, eventually I can take. So it's called Distressed because it deals with old. They're supposed to look old. They're supposed to look like somebody did them years and years and years ago. So that's the series, and I've been doing that for over 20 years. Like I said, I still have the Hasselblad cameras in the back room. I just went and bought 5 rolls. You can't believe how much 5 rolls. Black and white used to be cheap. It used to be cheap, remember? Now it's outrageously expensive. So I bought 5 rolls of 2 1/4 film, and I just got all the props. Just got the last prop this week for another one. So like I said, they're all about dreams, and that's what I do. But I want to show. Can you see this, or should I go back to? Can you see this? So this is the new project. Yeah. We did a big project. One of the biggest ones we ever did was photographing 27 men and women on death rows all over the United States, 14 different death rows. And that gets shown all the time. And I just was over at Harvard University, and I'm going to be on a panel. And I actually saw KB Beck. Is she there? It's KB. Are you there? She's having me talk on a panel about. You there?
Yeah, hi.
I saw your name when you first came up. She's over at Harvard. And she's asked me to be on a panel. She had me over there the other day looking at an exhibit she has on the death penalty. And she has me on a panel coming up in 2023 to talk about my work associated with her work. So that's but our latest project, and this has been curtailed by the pandemic, by COVID, but we've been photographing. The idea is to photograph all 54 countries in Africa one by one. So we just got back in May from our 15th. So we've done 15 countries. This is the first volume. This is the book, Pan-Africa Project. So we've been doing this for a number of years and got really waylaid by COVID, but we're back. We got back. We were there for 5 weeks in April, May, and we're now editing those photographs, and it's a huge project, and that's going to be exhibited as early as this summer. That's going to be on exhibit this summer. It's been exhibited several times in the past, but it's a major project, and it's a long-term project. With luck, it'll take me the rest of my life. So anybody got any questions? I can go back to talk. I can talk forever. I've got lots of pictures left.
So Danica is suggesting that you write these stories in a book, like a memoir.
Believe it or not, she's right on target. During COVID, I had a roommate because he got stuck here, and sitting across from each other at this table eating, I would tell him stupid stories, all these stupid stories, right? And you know, what do you got? You can't go anywhere, so you're telling story, telling lies, right? And I would tell him about the photographs that are surrounding. I say, I took that one for, you know, I took that one in Alaska, I took that one in Japan, I took that one. And a lot of these stories, just like the Miles Davis stories, are a lot more complicated than maybe even just the photograph itself. So he says, you got to write this stuff down. So I actually started. So I actually have started. It's not a memoir. It's stories about the photographs I've taken all over the world. So whether or not that actually anything ever comes of that, but it was a great exercise during COVID when there was very little else you could do. So hopefully something will come of it.
Lou, I'd like to ask, you mentioned early that as a Black person, you had trouble getting hired.
Yes.
Did the alternative weeklies
continue to have trouble getting hired? But go ahead. Yes.
I was asking. Has it changed at all?
No.
No. What do you think is behind this kind of bias? I mean, is it really just racial bias, or is it explanation that you don't, Black people aren't photographers, or what? What's the story here?
Well, there was a wonderful, this happened before COVID. A wonderful Black teacher, he teaches, very, very well-known Black teacher, photography teacher. He was at Cornell, I think, at the time. Was interviewed. He's very, very vocal, very, very, very well respected and everything. And the interviewer said, there are no Black photographers. What are you talking about? Other than a couple of people that you can mention, there's no Black photographers. And he literally went down a list just off the top of his head and must have done 20 people. But that's the perception, is that people don't think that there are Black photographers. And so they get relegated to, there are Black photographers that have done, wonderful work for newspapers, of course, but being the, I wanted to be what they used to call the road warrior. I wanted to be that Life magazine photographer. That's how it started. And due to survival, I've had to do all these other things. I've had to learn how to do still life. That wonderful photographer, Jean-Pierre Rago, very bright. We're up in Boston. I said, Jean-Pierre, I just want a bag of camera. I want a bag of Leicas, and I want to travel the world and cure the ills of the world with my camera, And he just looked at me like I was, out of my mind. I was young. I didn't, it's hubris and just stupid. And he said, well, maybe you should rethink that. You're in Boston, it's cold, and you're not going to be able to shoot outside 9 months out of the year. Maybe you should. And that's when I learned how to do still life. And a lot of my, I used to tell my students, it's not like I have prescience. It's not like I planned this in order to do this. It's all survival. I've had to learn different kinds of, learn how to light, how to use strobes, how to use how to travel. I wrote a book on travel photography just because I had to build travel muscles. And that stuff is to be able to take a picture in a different language, in a different food, in a different, and to gain the trust of a tribe halfway around the world that doesn't speak your language, of an industry, of a CEO that has no idea why you're there. Developing those kinds of things, and it was purely survival. Had nothing to do with my being genius. It was just purely survival, that kind of thing. So no, it hasn't gotten any easier. It does have to do with race. I would suspect it also may at this juncture have something to do with ageism too, because people work with people that they relate to, that they're the same age. You don't want this old man coming in there. But we've had some wonderful clients lately who have understood hopefully the quality of things we're doing and the passion we're bringing to it. And so literally it's been amazing. And just during COVID, people saying, no, I want your eye. I want your eye. I want what you do that's a little bit different. So I don't know.
Were you ever able to meet some of the established Black photographers, like I'm thinking of Gordon Parks or
yes,
like Carava? You met these guys?
I got to be very good friends with Gordon Parks. I was in the photograph that they, of his 90th birthday. They called us the Gordon Parks 90. So I was there. Yes, I knew him. I wasn't a buddy, but he recognized, we would say not. I have a wonderful story about Roy DeCarava. I was asked by a school up north of Boston, and they wanted five Black photographers. So I got a woman, Eli Reed, if anybody knows him, wonderful Eli Reed. It's a Magnum photographer. Tony Barboza, who's a commercial photographer. Tony, because he does do jazz too. I got him. Got a couple of other people. So I wanted Roy DeCarava to be in the exhibit. Called him, no phone, no cell phone. So I call. Finally got him on the phone, and I told him, and he told me to stick it where the sun don't shine. And that's the only time I've ever talked to him. So yes.
What about Chuck Stewart?
Chuck, yes, I know Chuck. I never got to be friends with him, but like I said, Eli Reed, Chester Higgins, I could just go down the list. Yeah, I collect photographers.
Have you been mentoring younger photographers?
Lots and lots and lots. Yes, that's a big part, because I was treated so badly in the early days that I just remember I said to myself, I can remember the moment I said, if I was nobody, I said, if I ever get to a position where anybody's interested in what I have to say, I'm going to try to. So yes, I have done a lot of that. A lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Pamela.
Lou, first of all, it's so great to see you. I miss you so much.
COVID has kept us apart. How are you?
I'm hug, hug. So I was remembering the gallery talk that you gave. It was at the museum in Winchester.
Oh, the Griffin.
And I was remembering the stories that you told us about the pieces that are from your dream sequence. or sequences or whatever.
Can I
And
stop you for 1 second?
of
The
course,
word is hypnagogic.
and
Hypnagogic?
hypnagogic and
Hypnagogic.
hypnopompic.
Hypnopompic.
I was trying
Thank
to
you.
write it. I kept spelling
Thank
it wrong, but I noticed that Hrayr Attarian spelled it correctly.
That's right.
I don't know if I
Hypnagogic and
pronounced it.
hypnopompic. Yes.
I don't know if I pronounced your name properly, so forgive me.
No
So,
problem.
Thank you.
but Lou, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. So first of all, I don't have a question. I just want to say that you not only instruct younger photographers, you totally inspire older ones. So I just want to thank you for that. I'm too humble to ask the questions I want to ask in front of all these people, but I'm going to call you, baby.
Right. Well, I say I've been doing this for so long that I've been doing it I've been a photographer for longer than most of you have been alive. So that's
Not too much longer here.
So yes, it's been a good ride. It's been a good ride. As hard as Howard asked the question, it's hard as it has been. Think about it, 61 countries,
Remarkable.
just, I mean, I just eat up countries. I just places, we've done 15 African countries. It's just, every one has got this unique flavor, just, and we just got back from Kenya and it just blossomed. I mean, they just opened up the entire country for us. We shot industry and culture and healthcare and high tech and tribes and animals, and we spent a long time. We spent 5 weeks there, and really, so I guess we're getting us off the subject of jazz photography.
Well, that's okay. We're interested in your photography. How many people do you travel with when you say we?
Well, the first trip, because I did not think it was possible to do, I went by myself, and I broke myself. But every time then I've had at least one other. In this last time we had two, and I've had very often what we have to do is I have two others other than me, and then we have to sometimes hire a fixer. And if the fixer can't drive, then I think in Ethiopia for a while I had 5: a driver, a fixer, and 2 assistants. And but that's a big crew. That's a big crew, because I'm paying for hotel and eating and all that stuff. So we have to be a little bit more, so this last time we had 2, and we would almost always have some kind of fixer. Yeah.
So those assistants are working with lights and
yes,
things like that?
Yes. Yeah, the trips are very complicated, because we don't do a lot of the work here. We do a lot of research before we leave, but we do most of the work there because we want to talk to local Africans about what their country is about. And so they're the ones that so we don't do expats, almost no expats and things like that. So it's a lot of work. So what happens is, this past time, she may even be on, is Robin on here? Is Robin, are you tuned in? Anyway, she was doing a lot of the logistics, getting a hotel. You're going to be there in 5 hours. You need some place to stay, so we're all kinds of things like that. I'm doing a lot of the, hello, my name is, I want to photograph your automobile company. I'm doing a lot of that. So, okay, yes, we can be there on Wednesday at 9 o'clock, that kind of thing. So that's what, and when there are people that I don't. So there's a lot of logistics, just so the crews are at least 2 people. So I travel with 2, and I'm hoping if we make any money from this, so that, we've used Kickstarter. Does anybody know what Kickstarter is?
Yeah.
We've used Kickstarter to raise money.
Crowdfunding.
Yes, exactly. So we've done two major Kickstarter campaigns to raise money that not only paid for the trips, but this book was published sight unseen. People bought, futures in the book, and we published the book after we got the money and went on trips and things like that. So that was how we used Kickstarter, and then we're applying for grants and things like that. So does anybody here know Eric Jackson? Does anybody know Eric Jackson? Yes, you okay. Oh, Bob. Oh, that's, you know him, right? Okay. He was famous, hugely famous DJ at several of the radio stations who played jazz for the last over 40 years. And he just died about 2 weeks ago. And an amazing friend, because I've known him, we were both rugrats running around 40 years ago. We were supposed to be working on a jazz book, but he's gone now. So I guess that won't happen. But we were looking to produce a book out of the jazz, his knowledge and my photographs, that kind of thing.
Lou, I'm
Yes.
working on a tribute event for Eric. Yeah, I'm working.
When?
I don't know. We don't know yet. It's very complicated. I'll get in touch. Maybe we can do something together with that.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't just the person I listened to on the radio at night.
I know.
We became friends.
I was very close to him as well.
Yeah. This was a Superman. This guy walked on water.
I know. He told me I brought 1,000 artists to his show for interviews.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have to get together.
Okay. All right. Okay. Did you say something, Elaine?
Yes. I was wondering if, while you answer the rest of the questions, you could possibly put your screen back up and slowly scroll through some of the other wonderful jazz photos that you haven't talked about yet.
Can you see that? No.
No.
You can't see that. Okay, I'll do this screen share again. Sorry. And
maybe you can also share with us some of the Distressed series.
Yes, I can do that. I'll tell this one last story. This is Roy Haynes. He's still with us. I stopped showing a lot of the jazz pictures in my portfolios years ago because the young people had no idea who Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Mingus were. They had no idea, so I just stopped showing them. But Roy is still with us, I believe. And this was a photograph I did in Kansas City. And I'm going to tell this story just because it's just, again, part of that memoir fraught with all kinds of. I chased him for weeks and weeks and weeks before the jazz festival in Kansas City. Told him what I was doing, got 3 or 4 major names who were going to the festival to agree to be photographed, of which one was Roy. I got him to say yes. Then when I got there, he evaded me. He just kept having excuse. You could tell he didn't want to do it, etc. And finally one day he was doing absolutely nothing, and I trapped him, got him to say yes. And so I had been walking, this was several days, so I've been walking back and forth. This was right in the middle of where 12th Street and Vine, which is the famous song, the famous area, jazz area in Kansas City from years and years ago. And I wanted to photograph him in that environment. And this was a storefront literally right down the street from the Jazz Museum. And this is a Easter egg. And I had to look that up yesterday, an Easter egg. Robert Altman, the director of a movie called Kansas City about jazz, went here to photograph years before this to make the movie and the entire street was abandoned, was all the storefronts and everything. So this is a phony movie storefront. He completely redid all the storefronts along the street so that he could shoot. And the street, because they had nobody to go in and to rent these places, left it for years. So it was this movie set for years. And I go down the street and there's Jones Barbershop. So not only was it a Easter egg for Robert Altman, but the fact that this was an abandoned space, purely phony, and I convinced Roy Haynes to go down and shoot in front of my name, Jones Barbershop, for the photo. But he was, once I got him in front of the camera, he was delightful. So, and he was, while we were walking to it, he was he was just constantly in motion. He was just drumming on his body, using his hands to drum his legs, his chest. He was just boom, 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 and his mouth was going, keeping time with the music, up, 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 up. And I recognized the song. And so, and he had been really hard to get in, hard to agree, to finally agree. So he was singing and he was playing, patting himself and everything. And I heard the music and I started to sing along, because like I said, I had been a singer in college and I knew the song. It was there I go, there I go, there I go. Anyway, and so, and so we were walking down the street, I'm singing the song, he's playing it on his body, and finally I got him in position. And this is two Easter eggs, one from Robert Altman, the great film director, and the other one from the long list of cousins named Jones. But I will show you Distressed. Okay, so you see how, oops, let me see if I can get back to the one before that, although that was a good one. No. Yes. So you see how the picture looks like it's cracked, which is a detail that shows, if you find old photographs, sometimes the ferrotyping, the front of the print cracks. And so we started to, this was a photograph of a wonderful kid that I just did a wonderful theatrical production. He's a choreographer, dancer. But this is the kind of photograph. So these are images. So I hung him from the ceiling of my old studio and then turned the picture upside down.
Oh.
So you're seeing this one I did just before the exhibit. I had a huge exhibit in September of 2021. So this is one I did. This is in this studio. So I'm way up high on a ladder, photographing. I did the painting before she got there. But these are dreams, completely different, because sometimes the act of actually doing it in reality changes the whole nature, but they are all started as dreams. This was in the studio right behind me. We spent 3 days hanging butterflies. So these butterflies are were hanging all over the studio in order to be able to photograph. And like I said, this is being done on 2 1/4 black and white. Let's see something that's more recent. This is a photograph of, so see how they're all damaged. The photographs are almost all damaged in some way or another. So I'm paying homage not only to the dream, but I'm paying homage to the act of photographs and the photograph itself. So the photograph itself, by being damaged, plays a presence in the actual picture. The actual paper is its own piece of art, that kind of thing. In that if you find a photograph in a trunk in your attic and it's 100 years old, it not only, you sometimes don't even know who's in the picture, but the picture itself has value, just the print itself, because it's gone through this age. It's become damaged. It has a history in and of itself. So I'm sort of giving the images their own history. Oops.
Lily wants to know how you distress the photos.
All kinds of ways. In the early days, when it was just digital, when it was just film, very often we would overlay an acetate that would take, but in this particular case, you see here, this is a print that was actually torn and then rephotographed. So, and we taped it and then peeled the tape off so that you got this, as you know, how Scotch tape gets that kind of sticky. So this is that thing. But the image was, it started out was a little boy with a big sort of sailfish that was the full fish that you see over bars. And as time went on, it devolved or evolved into, and then I had an intern make this fish for me. I had a woman, they take sometimes years to get, I had a woman who was a taxidermist send me literally a fish, an entire fish that we scaled, but it just didn't have it wasn't big enough. It didn't have the bones all collapsed. So I actually made it, this is paper mache and coat hangers. And that's how I made the fish. Lily is here. That's Lily and her twin sister. So we just did that just recently here in the studio. So Lily, thank you for tuning in, Lily. And this is her, a current picture. So I had this idea, and then she helped me. I've known them for years. Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation and sharing your great artwork. This is being recorded, so it will be available on YouTube in a few weeks. I'll look forward to seeing more of your photos by following your website.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll put the website for everyone in the chat.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been really, really spectacular. Thank you, Lily, for saying something. It was great. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cynthia.
Thank you, Lou.
Cynthia. I see you, Cynthia. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
All right. Talk to you
I love
soon.
you. Thank you for putting this on. This is great.
You're welcome.
I'm hope I'm on your mailing list now.
Yeah. We'll have we have a few more scheduled for into the early next year.
It's wonderful. What a great organization. Thank you so much.